Me, 17W, and my Aunt Sue, 44, have always had a normal relationship. She doesn't really freak out about it, and I try to be understanding. However, I have always not had much respect for her. Don't get me wrong, I think she is a good woman, but I have never seen her as an authority figure. I always thought it was a matter of her approach to life, spontaneous, not mine, but recently I realized that's not the case. A few months ago at a family sitting, it was after Halloween, we were chatting about stuff during dinner, and I mentioned a couple of great horror movies I'd watched recently. I thought it went great and we had a good meal, but it turns out my aunt didn't think so. The next day, Sue called my mom and said that she was worried about me because she thought I was not interacting with them at all at meetings, acting like an unwanted, alienated child. Furthermore, I love horror movies, and that immediately means I have mental issues and need to take them to a psychiatrist. Didn't seem to realize that I don't talk only with her because she is always arrogant and uninterested. She always only brings up topics in conversation with me that I don't like, so for the most part I just listen to her and agree with her. My mom freaked out at this kind of throw-in and told me about it. My mom told me not to take any words for granted, and I'm grateful to her. That's when I realized that Sue always treated all people with a high attitude. Some of her phrases, decisions, and opinions always stressed me out, even though I ignored them. Since then, I stopped pretending that everything is okay. In general, Sue is completely irresponsible. A while back, my dad almost lost his studio to her. My late grandfather bequeathed it to my aunt and mom after he died, but my dad bought both parts on the condition that Sue be allowed to keep some things there. Recently, she came to the studio, and on leaving, she left the door open, wide open. Dad had converted the studio into a workshop and kept a huge amount of equipment that he could lose because of her mistake. She always had money and work problems, yet she raised my cousin, Elizabeth, 22, and was adventurous. She divorced her ex-husband almost immediately after giving birth to Elizabeth, who, by the way, has epilepsy. 5 years ago, she decided to have another child 5 weeks despite loans, money difficulties, and a bunch of unpaid debts, including debts to my parents. She explained her decision as follows: "I wanted this child very much. Although my mom is sure that my aunt got an unwanted pregnancy and didn't have time to have an abortion, she already had 3. No one thought it was a good idea, but my aunt was adamant. Since then, there have been more problems. My mom and grandmother are fully funding Elizabeth's treatment in another state since she can't afford it. They were fine with helping her, understanding her situation. However, they started to feel like she didn't appreciate it at all. She skips trips to the doctor, buys cheaper versions of pills, even though they always give her money for it. On Christmas Eve, she had a seizure, which she told no one anything about, and lied about that everything was fine. For Christmas, Sue took my cousin and went on a trip to Canada with her friends. Everyone was shocked at the news, but there was no point in talking her out of it. After returning, they were both exhausted, and as a result, the cousin 5 became seriously ill and ended up in hospital. She is fine now, but as a result, Sue has debts to pay for housing, car repairs, treatment for her daughter, and debts to her friends. Now her car is broken, and she has nothing to drive. Her house may be foreclosed on, and no one wants to lend her money. Already desperate, she came to us a week ago and asked for financial help. My parents have a split budget and decide on such favors separately. Since I started working, my parents started giving me fixed money for expenses and told me that I do all the shopping I need, except food and school expenses, on my own, so it seems like I have become the new wallet for her. My dad immediately said no. He was still angry about the incident with the studio. My mom reminded Sue of the already large debt she owed her and said she didn't think she would continue to help her. I thought Sue would yell at them and leave as she usually did, but then suddenly she turned to me. I have money saved up from work and gifts, about $1,400, and I wasn't planning on saving it for anything in particular, just putting it aside to have. She said that since that money wasn't going to be invested in something, I need to make the right decision and take care of my favorite relative, her and my cousins. I love my cousins, but I'm not ready to give away the money I've saved for 6 months of work. I told Sue, she's definitely not my favorite relative, and I don't think I should take care of her kids, and that it's stupid of her to think that an alienated psychotic child will help her. Sue started yelling, calling me and my parents greedy assholes. Almost broke the mirror in the hallway. After which we kicked her out of the house. I still think my family should stop helping her, even though my mom is hesitant. I've been telling her that it isn't our business for whole this week, but now I'm not sure I should leave my cousins with a bunch of Sue problems. So, AITAH for not helping Sue? AITAH for uppcutting my dad because he ignored my obvious cry for help. Okay, so I'll make this short and sweet. This happened a good 2 years ago when I was 19, but my dad still mentions it and has little arguments over it. 2 years ago, my dad's coworker got diagnosed with colon cancer, so rightfully he was worried and concerned. He'd visit her every day, give her gift baskets and whatnot. One day, I began to have symptoms of a cold. No biggie, I can survive. But over a month, it doesn't seem to go, and I started getting other strange symptoms, or started noticing other symptoms I thought were normal. Obviously, I asked my dad to take me to the hospital. I couldn't drive due to the medication I was taking. And he refuses. He told me I was being dramatic and I needed to stay in bed, and he was busy making sure his coworker was okay. Days go by of me asking for help or some closure that I'm okay, and even argues with me. Again telling me I'm a big girl and even stopped speaking to me for a week because I called of sick to work. He's an insane workaholic and hates lazy people. Months go by, and by this point, I stopped asking by dad because, like I said, he's too focused on his colleague. Okay, no big deal, I guess it's just COVID. I'll get a test and everything will be fine. On the way there, my dad calls me and asks where I'm going, so I tell him the truth. He says, "You want to see someone who's ill? Look at college's name," and tells me if I know it's COVID, there's no point in wasting time for a test. I order a taxi to the testing center, and in the taxi, I collapse and wake up in the hospital. That's when I'm diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. They said I should have gone to my GP the second I started getting my symptoms, and that I've had it for nearly a year without knowing. Oh, okay, cute. They asked me why I ignored it, and I say what I've just told you. Then they tell me I was risking my life by ignoring the symptoms. So the second I got home, I slammed my diagnosis down onto the table in front of my dad, and before he could read it, I punched him, and he didn't speak to me for days. Years later, that little punch seemed to ruin our relationship, and I haven't seen him fully in a year. Yet, whenever I do, he brings it up. So, that brings the question, was I the asshole?